Hello, hello, hello! It's Juliana Michaels and welcome to my channel. Are you looking for a fun way to stretch your stencils? In this video, I'll show you how to use spray inks and your favorite stencils to create gorgeous, one-of-a-kind backgrounds using a simple monoprinting technique. It's quick, a little messy, in the best way possible, and perfect for adding bold color and texture to your handmade cards. You might even find it a little addictive. You'll learn how to monoprint with spray inks and stencils, tips to get a good transfer, and ways to use your printed backgrounds in card making. Whether you're a beginner or a seasoned crafter, this technique is a great way to experiment and loosen up creatively. As always, please check your stash for similar items when it comes to the supplies I'm using. If you're interested in any of the products I'm using in this video, you can find the supply list with links in the description box below. When you shop through those links, and whether you purchase that exact item or something else entirely, you're supporting me at no extra cost to you, and I really appreciate that so very much. So in this video, I've got something a little different for you. Well, kind of a haul type video, I guess you'd say, and maybe a little bit of a challenge for myself. I do occasionally purchase items for myself that aren't like related to design team projects or supplies that were gifted to me for my design team connections, but I thought it would be fun to take some of the new to me products that I just purchased and create something. And I thought I would share that process with you as well. So first off though, I want to just kind of walk through some of the supplies that I got, and some of these are old, some of these are new. But they're all new to me. So first up, I have the stencil from Tim Holtz. This is the Clockwork stencil, and it's THS013. So this is a really early stencil for Tim, one of his first ones. And then next up, I've got this Simon Hurley's Typewriter stamp set. I love Typewriter font, so this stamp, it's just a big, huge rubber stamp, just really appealed to me, and this I know is going to get a lot of love. Next, I got the fancy dies. I think it's called Delicate. Yeah, Delicate Butterfly die set. And there's two dies in here. And I think they actually were like both connected to each other. I think like this. And I'm not sure if they were meant to be cut apart or not. But it has an inside area that it cuts out, and then in the outline area. And I decided to take my wire snips and cut them apart so that I could create just a solid butterfly if I wanted to, or add that detail on the inside. And to kind of help make sure I can line it up if I need to, I cut one before I took it apart, and then I can kind of lay these pieces on there, line everything up, and then just use a piece of mint tape to hold the dies together so that I can cut it as this. Or I can take that tape off and remove that inside piece and then cut a solid butterfly if I would like. And that kind of gives me some options for layering. And then next, new to me, are the Stitches stamp set from Tim Holtz. It's CMS 365. And I just kind of had my eye on these for a while, and I thought they might add some fun details to my cards and projects. And then finally, I got the Elizabeth Craft Designs. It's called Stencil Alphabet, and the packaging was just really large, and as you know, with a lot of the die sets, they're kind of adhered to those like thin paperboard inserts. So I just removed them and added them onto these magnet sheets and then into some storage envelopes so that I could easily find the number or letter that I wanted, and but then kind of keep them all together as well. So a couple other stamp sets that I've used in the project that I'm going to be making are these stamp sets that are Curator CMS 493 and Tidbits CMS 488. And as you can see, they're just a bunch of like little labels and tidbits of things. So I will be using these as well. And then as for the paper, I'm going to be working with the Tim Holtz Mixed Media Heavy Stock #8 tags. But if you don't have these tags, but you have maybe some of the mixed media heavy stock, you could use like one of Tim's tag dies and die cut your own. You could, for that matter, you know, cut your own tag. It's not really that hard of a process to do there. And then as far as the mediums I'm going to be working with, I've got some embossing ink here and some black embossing powder, black soot archival ink, distress ink and walnut stain and old paper. And then I've got a variety of sprays here. So I've got walnut stained faded jeans and rusty hinge for distress spray stains. And then I also have the same colors in the spritz, so rusty hinge, walnut stain, and faded jeans. And if you don't have the distress spray stains, the oxides would work for this as well. And you could possibly use the mica stains, but they're going to be, the spritz are more translucent, so you can kind of see through these a little bit more than you can the mica stains. So you're going to lose a little bit of some of the effect with some of it. But that said, the purpose here is just to have some fun and play with your supplies. So, and then the other two things I have are the gloss sprays from Dina Wakley. There's a black and a gilt, and these are acrylic sprays. So they're permanent once you get them on anything, once they dry. So, but I'm going to be using these as well. All right, so let's get into it. I'm going to be working in my splat box, and I just always prefer this because it just helps keep the mess contained. And then I like the paper towels on the bottom just to soak up some of that excess ink. And you're going to need your stencil and then your sprays, the spray stains and the spritz, not the gloss acrylics. We'll get to those later. And to start with, kind of a couple of ways you can do this, and we're going to kind of get a 2-for-1 with this technique. And so first off, before we use the spritz, you want to make sure you mix them up and shake them up really well. There's a little rattling ball in there, and you want to shake that up until you get all of this pigment that's settled on the bottom mixed in. That will help prevent clogging, as well as when you're finished, making sure you wipe off that nozzle. So if they do clog though, just remove this entire nozzle, take it to a sink and run some warm water through it, and it should loosen up and be fine. So that said though, start shaking away. And so that's what you want to see then on the bottom, is that it's all mixed in. We're gonna take the stencil, and I'm gonna work on the back side of this, and I'll show you why here in a moment, but you can do this on either side. Then I'm just going to start spritzing a little bit of the ink onto the stencil here. And I just kind of find with the sprays, you just do best to just spritz and go. Like, don't hesitate, just spray and go. And if you want to add a little water to this, you can, just a light mist maybe. And then now I'm going to just kind of carefully lift up my stencil. Now I've got my paper tag here, and I'm going to take that inky stencil, carefully turn it over, and place it on top of my tag. So then what you're going to do is just take a clean paper towel and dab it over the top of the stencil to kind of lift off any ink that might kind of seep through. As you can see, some did, and if some does, it's not the end of the world at all. But that is basically, in effect, you have taken your stencil and turned it into a stamp. So now we're going to just carefully lift that up and reveal our stamped design. And then as you can see, there's still some ink left on this, and if you want to salvage that and use it for something else, you can. But in this instance, I'm going to just kind of clean this off and go on to the next step here. So we've got our stencil clean, but before we go on to the next step, I want to dry this ink. And the reason being is that when you dry the layers between working with the distress inks and sprays, then you can build those colors and adds just a little more interest and texture to things. Once that ink is all dry, then you're going to take your stencil and place it back over your design. Just kind of line it back up. And then we're going to take our spritz and kind of try to remember where you sprayed what colors. So here I've got the rusty hinge kind of in the corner here and a little bit there in the center. And then I've got the faded jeans here and here. And then I added some of the walnut stain here and then down here. So it doesn't have to be perfect, but you'll see kind of why it's nice to kind of keep the colors closest to each other. So I'm going to start off with the faded jeans here. And again, just kind of spritzing over that area. A little bit of coverage. And again, make sure that you got these all shaken up nicely. You need another remix before you go here. You can add more. And let's do. There we go. All right. So as you can see, like the colors with the spritz are just a lot lighter. So then you're just going to gently lift that off, and there is our background. Is that not cool? Or what, huh? There is a look at the background that we made. So I'm going to set this to the side and let this dry. Grab another tag here and put it down on top of another paper towel or whatever. And that stencil that we just sprayed the spritzes on, we're going to, if you feel like you need to reactivate it a little bit, just give it a light mist. And then we're going to do what we did earlier with the spray stain in the stencil, and we're going to place this on there. Grab another towel and rub that over while lifting off that ink and then helping transfer it onto the paper. And then there is the image with the spritzes, and as before, I'm going to dry this with my heat tool. And then you can also, dry that one that we just sprayed the spritz through if you like. Or you can just set it to the side to dry. And then the stencil that we just sprayed through, we're going to clean that off again. I usually just kind of wipe it off with a rag and some water. Give it a little dry there. And now we're going to take the tag that we just spritzed and stamped. And if it's getting a little rolly on you, just, kind of run your finger over the back of it there and kind of flatten it back out. And then you're going to line up your stencil with your design. And now we're going to take the spray stains and do the same thing that we did when we did the spritz spraying. And you're just going to kind of spritz through the areas where you have that color already. The stencil moves, just pull it back into place there. And again, I'm trying to kind of spray where those colors were. There we go. And if you want to add, the little spritz of water, you can. I am not going to do that. We're just going to gently lift that off and reveal that design. Then you can just set that to the side and let that dry. And then you still have a lot of ink on this stencil, so if you want, you could lay this and just kind of keep repeating this process like over and over and over again, and create another tag by just picking this up and flipping it over onto another tag if you want. So you could just keep flip-flopping and using that excess ink that's left on there when you spray over and over and over again to your heart's content. But for this video, I'm just going to stick with these two here. So I'm going to clean this off and we'll go on to the next step. So here is a look at the two backgrounds that we created with the kind of mirrored 2-for-1 kind of technique that we did with the sprays. So this was the first one we made where we sprayed the stencil with the spray stains, stamped with the stencil, and then we sprayed through the stencil with the spritz. On this one, we stamped the stencil with the spritz on there, and then sprayed through the stencil with the Distress spray stains. Now, you might notice on this one, the stencil, I didn't get it lined up just perfectly, and I'm okay with that. I mean, it happens. So, you know, if that happens to you and it makes you completely crazy, start over. It's just paper. But, you know, you could also flip it over and use the other side, possibly. But we're going to be adding some other layers and some stamping and inking and things to this. So it's not going to be super noticeable once we get all that added on there. So I wouldn't fret over that. So next we're going to grab that text typewriter stamp. Now if you don't have this one, of course, there are lots of script and text stamps out there that you can use, so feel free to you know, use whatever kind of stamp you might have. And we're going to start off by just placing our tag in our stamping platform, or if you don't have a stamping platform, you can just stamp with this stamp. You could use, there are some big stamping blocks out there, or you could just ink this and keep it on the sleeve, on the plastic piece that it comes on, to give you a little more stability, and you can stamp with that. And just kind of line this up here. There we go. And I like to put a little bit of like a temporary adhesive in here. You could also use the sticky mats. For me, the sticky mats just get so dirty so fast, and then I don't, they're just not for me. So if you like sticky mats, you go for it. Alrighty, so get that lined up. And now we're going to take the archival ink. I've got black soot here, and you just want some kind of permanent ink. And I'm just going to rub it over the surface. I'm not stamping it down, I'm just rubbing it. So this is going to give us a really light coverage of ink. And then I'm not going to try to stamp hard. I'm just going to push down here and there. And you'll see that you barely get a transfer of ink. Barely can see it. So if you want it more intense, stamp a little bit more pressure down so you really get that stamp covered with ink, and then push a little harder. You could also use like a stamping tool like this that just helps you put some pressure through it. This is called a stamp pendable. And there you can see the transfer of ink is a lot more intense and darker. And then by using a stamping platform, we're also able to stamp it repeatedly. If you wanted to get it even darker, you could stamp again and get it a little bit darker if you'd like. So we'll just show you that here. So just re-ink the stamp and run that back over. And just a little bit darker again. So just a little darker. Now we're going to repeat that with the other stamp, or the other tag, I mean. And now this time I'm going to just rub the ink pad over the stamp and stamp, because this is a much lighter, because you can see with that spritz, it's a little more translucent, so it'll give you a lighter effect there. So there you can see just a nice light stamped image. Again, if you want that a little darker, you could just rub over the image and restamp. But if you want it a lot darker, then, you know, really apply that ink to the stamp with good pressure. Don't rub the ink pad. And so then we're going to just set these to the side, let that ink dry. So next up, I'm going to do some of the die cutting. And so with the delicate butterfly die, I cut a piece of the mixed media heavy stock with the entire butterfly. And then I used just the outline and cut a piece of vellum. So I just thought that would kind of look nice to layer behind there. And then I took the stencil alphabet and die cut some mixed media heavy stock with some of that. And for this mixed media heavy stock, what I did is just took the paper and ink smushed it into some old paper distress ink, and you'll get this magical old paper effect. And if you wanted, you could also do the butterfly like that, but I'm going to show you a little something with this here next. So for the butterfly, I'm just going to give it a spritz with some of the walnut stain distress spray. So just kind of a quick, however much you want there. And I think while that is still wet, let's give it a spritz with the walnut stain spritz, just to give it a little shimmer. I think that'll add a nice touch. And then we'll give that a quick dry. And then hopefully you can pick up in the camera how shiny that is. But if you want it a little bit more intense with the shimmer, dry that and then add another layer of the spritz. Or if you want it a little bit darker in color, add a little bit more of the spray stain. That'll darken it up. So you want to think about like contrast of it on our background. And then as far as the little alphabet stencils, what I took, I took the inked paper and then just a little bit of the walnut stain in a blending brush and just inked the edges real good. And then if you want to get it a little darker in the center, you can also take the blending brush and just kind of apply it like if you were actually using the stencil. But it's helpful to have a smaller brush because of the size of these little stencils, because they are, you know, they're not very big. We're going to add some stamping detail with those stitch stamps. And we just want to make sure everything is nice and dry at this point, because we're going to be doing some heat embossing. So you're going to need your embossing powder and your Versamark ink. If you don't, or some kind of embossing ink. If you don't have embossing ink, you could use any kind of a pigment ink. If you don't, and that said, so then if you don't have black embossing powder and you've got like a black pigment ink and clear embossing powder, you'll get the same effect. And then from here, we're going to kind of think about placement of everything. So we've got our little bits and pieces here. And I kind of want to think about where I might want some of these. And you can use whatever kind of adhesive you want here to adhere these down. Just going to grab a little bit of collage medium. And I'm not gluing them down all the way, just as you can see, I've kind of got them just gluing the edge. And then now what I'm going to do is take some of these stitched stamps, and I'm just going to kind of place them here and there. So I'm going to kind of think about like I'm stitching these onto the background. There, you could also add, kind of go across that way. Let's do that. And then I'm also going to think about stitching the butterfly here in the center, which I should have done first. So let's get that repositioned here. Let's make sure nothing's going to move. Let's pick these up here. I can move that out of the way. Then we can go back and add these. You know what? Maybe let's do that one this way, I think. Let's do that. Okay. Now we're just going to ink these up using the embossing ink. And stamp that over onto our paper here. And then now we're just going to sprinkle some of the embossing powder over those areas. And here's where, if your ink was not, any of the spray inks or the stamping was not dry completely, the powder is going to stick to it. And I thought I had dried everything super well, and I still am getting a little sticking. So if that happens, you can grab a little small paintbrush and wipe off any of that excess powder. All right, and then from here, we're just going to use our heat gun and heat emboss this. So there is our heat embossed images, and it kind of gives you the effect that you did some stitching on there, although typically thread is not shiny like this. So if you want to remove that shine, you could rub over this real lightly with like some steel wool, and that will remove that shininess from the heat embossing. But I kind of like the contrast it provides. And now I also want to add some stitching to the butterfly, because I want it to look like it's kind of stitched on there. So I'm just going to take that stamp and the butterfly. Just kind of line that up. And stamp that down the center of the body there. And then I'll add the embossing powder. Kind of use your brush to wipe off some of the excess. and then use your heat gun to heat emboss that. So then from there, you can just glue your layers together for the butterfly. You can just add a little adhesive to the center here. And then if you've got anything overhanging, just, trim that off with your scissors. And then from there you can take a blending tool and just ink the edges of everything. That will also kind of cover up any, if you didn't have things lined up super good with the stencil. As you can see, that stencil moving, once you get all these things added on there, you don't really notice it much. So, and then lastly, I stamped some of those like the Tidbits and the Curators onto some cardstock that I ink smushed with the old paper. And I actually have like a bin that I just kind of keep all these little pieces, because I just sat down one day and stamped and created all these and cut them all out. And then I can just kind of reach in there and grab what I might want to play with. I've just got a couple of little labels, and just going to ink the edges up here a little bit. And then I'm going to just distress these a little bit. So I'm going to crinkle them a little, add another little ink to them, roll up the edges real good, ink them real good. And then just a matter of kind of playing around with where to put these. But with the butterfly, you just kind of line it up with where you had stamped. And then you can just adhere that with some, little foam squares if you like, or whatever. I'm going to use the foam squares just to give it a little bit of dimension. And then, like I said, then you just line that up with kind of the stamped section. So it looks like it's kind of been stitched on there. You can do that same thing with these little pieces too if you wanted to stamp it, like stamp directly onto the tag. Then glue these on and then stamp again. Kind of give you a cool effect. All right, so one last thing I want to do before I'm finished. I'm just going to remove my butterfly. Nice thing about the foam tape is it comes off pretty easily. So if you are following along, I apologize for messing this up here, but now we're going to take those sprays, the acrylic sprays, and you can do this with the butterfly on. I'm just taking it off because I don't want splatters on there. That's what we're going to be doing, is some splattering. So just make sure you shake these up real well, just kind of like the spritz. There's a little mixing ball in there, and you want to make sure you get all that pigment mixed in real well. Now, I do find that this gold one tends to get a lot of air bubbles in it, and if you've got a suggestion on how to minimize that, please do share, because when you do the splattering, those little bubbles are kind of problematic. So you can splatter like with a brush, which is what I'm going to do here. Just I want to see if I can get less bubbles doing it this way. But it's about the same. That said, so you could also just splatter with the nozzle. So you just dip it in and pretend like this is your paintbrush, and then tap it and get your splatters. There you go. And then just give that a quick dry, or let it dry for a minute or so. And like I said, this paint, once dry, is permanent because it's an acrylic paint. So definitely recommend working in a splat box. If you get any on your craft mat, just want to try to, or if you get it somewhere you don't want it, just try to clean it up before it has a chance to dry. It does dry pretty quickly. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the black. And then again, give that a quick dry. And because that is a gloss spray, it is going to stay pretty shiny. So yeah, there's lots of shimmer and shine there. Then we can adhere our butterfly back in place. And then there is a look at our finished tag that we created. So all these techniques could easily be done on a card, so just keep that in mind. Even with that stencil, what you could just do is, you know, if you want something so that you're getting that entire stencil design, just create this as a panel and then put that on the front of your card and just cut it down. You know, it doesn't have to be a tag shape. And then put some layers behind it and be something you could use on a card as well. But it was kind of fun playing with the techniques. And like here's another one I made with the opposite background. And this still kind of similar with the design that I did. On this butterfly I didn't spray the spritz, I just did the walnut stain distress spray. The stamping on the background here is real light. I just did kind of a one-time stamp where I just lightly rubbed the archival ink over that typewriter stamp, so it's less noticeable. But yeah, just a couple of options there for you. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more card making tips and techniques. I hope these finished tags give you a spark of inspiration. Remember, spray your ink onto the stencil, flip it over onto your paper, and press to transfer the image. It's quick, fun, and gives you bold, artsy backgrounds every time. The best part? No two prints are ever the same, and that's the beauty of monoprinting. I'd love to see your take on this technique, so tag me on social media or drop a comment below if you give it a try. Until next time, stay crafty, my friend. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you can join me on a more regular basis. Hit the like if you enjoyed this video, and if you want to join me on my other social media platforms, you can find the links to those in the description box below. Also, feel free to leave me a comment if you have any questions or if there's something you'd love to share with me and our community. I'll see you in the comments below and in the next video. Until next time, stay crafty, my friend.